board will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyers, Alderwoman Flowers, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderwoman Ingracia, Alderwoman Young, Alderman Conway, Alderman Ortman, Alderman Vollmer, Alderman Villa, Alderman Arnowitz, Alderwoman Murphy, Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman Florida, Alderwoman Behringer, Alderman Rhodey, Alderman Kennedy, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Schmid, Alderman French, Alderman Boyd, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Ogilvie, Alderman Cone, Alderman Williamson, Alderman Carter, Alderwoman Cruzen, President Reed.
Here.
Alderwoman Flowers, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Ingracia, Alderwoman Young, Alderman Conway, Alderman Vollmer, Alderman Villa, Alderman Arnowitz, Alderwoman Howard, Alderman Boyd, Alderman Cone, Alderwoman Cruzen, 21 present.
A quorum being present, we will be led today in prayer by Reverend Spencer Lamar Booker, the pastor of the Cathedral St. Paul AME.
Will you bow your heads as I pray? Dear wise and loving Father, first let me say thank you on behalf of all who are gathered here today. Thank you for your many abundant blessings. Thank you for life itself, for the measure of health we need to fulfill our callings, for sustenance and for friendship. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. In the scriptures you have said that citizens ought to obey the governing authorities, and since you have established those very authorities to promote peace and order and justice, therefore I pray for our mayor, pray for President Reed, I pray for the very levels of the city officials and in particular for this assembled council. I'm asking that you will graciously grant them wisdom to govern, give them a sense of the welfare and true needs of the people, a keen thirst for justice and righteousness, and confidence to do that which is good and fitting. I pray for the agenda set before them today. Please give assurance of what would please you and that which will benefit the people in our beloved city of St. Louis. It is in your most blessed name we pray. Amen.
That was a great prayer. I told Pastor Booker that was a great prayer. Introduction of honor guests. Any introduction of honor guests? Alderwoman from the 15th.
Today, I'd like to have as my special guests Carpenter's District Council, Paul Higgins, Keith Taylor, and Jeff Hance.
Alderwoman from the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I would like to have as my special guest today Mr. Anthony Lancia with AGC and Dave Rudolph with the St. Louis Police Officers Association.
Alderman from 27.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I would like to have as my honored guest Mr. John Collins, the president of the Collegian 100 at Lincoln University chapter. Thanks.
Alderman from the 26.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have as my special guest today Ms. Stephanie Robinson of Ameren UE, and also Brian Williams. He's the staff with the William L. Clay Congressman, and also he's a resident of the 26th Ward. Thank you.
Alderman from the 12th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to introduce my special guests today, Mr. Brian Sullivan and Ken Franklin from the Board of Elections.
Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have for my honored guest today is Ronnie Auer and Police Officer David Rudolph, who gets 2 today, and then Officer Sergeant McLaughlin, who turns 30 today also. Thank you.
Oh. A young man. Any further introductions? Any further? Alderman from the 3rd.
Well, Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to have as my special guest Ms. Linda Primer.
Alderman from the 20th.
Mr. President, members of the board, I received a very sketchy and questionable email from an individual from a hospital asking me as a former alderman of the 10th Ward to please introduce today Fred Steffen. However, it's my understanding that he is on his big wheel tricycle because this is bike to work day.
Oh, there you go. Alderman from the 17th, you recognize on approval of the minutes.
Yes, Mr. President, I move for the approval of the minutes of our May 2nd meeting.
Moved by the Alderman from the 17th, entertained second by motion, seconded by the Alderman from the 23rd. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Report of city officials.
Report of city officials can be found in sections A, B, and C of the agenda and have been placed in all aldermen's mailboxes.
We'll dispense with line items 7 through 10. First reading board bills. Board
Bill 59, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance pertaining to the transit sales tax imposed pursuant to Section 94.660 of RSMO as adopted and approved by the voters of the City of St. Louis City pursuant to Ordinance 6316A, creating the City Public Transit Sales Tax Trust Fund, directing the Treasurer to deposit funds received pursuant to said sales tax into the City Public Transit Sales Tax Trust Fund, Account 1, appropriating $10,074,162, providing for the payment of such funds during the period of July the 1st, 2014 through June the 30th, 2015, containing a severability clause. Board Bill number 60, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance pertaining to the transit sales tax imposed pursuant to Section 94.660 of RSMO as adopted and approved by the voters of the City, St. Louis City on November the 4th, 1997, creating the City Public Transit Sales Tax Trust Fund, directing the Treasurer to deposit funds received pursuant to said sales tax into the City Public Transit Sales Tax Trust Fund, Account 2, appropriating $10,074,162, providing for the payment of such funds during the period of July the 1st, 2014 through June the 30th, 2015, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill number 60, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance appropriating the sum of $2,153,420 as described and defined in Section 94.600 through 94.655 of RSMO 2000 as amended for the period herein stated, which sum is hereby appropriated out of the Transportation Trust Fund to the Bi-State Development Agency for transportation purposes, and further providing that the appropriation is conditional upon the Bi-State Development Agency supplying the Board of Estimate and Apportionment and an annual evaluation report and containing a severability clause. Board Bill number 62, sponsored by Alderman Bosley, an ordinance recommended by the Parking Commission, making appropriation for payment of the operating expenses, capital equipment, and improvement expenses, including lease purchase agreements involving the Parking Division assets, debt service expenses of the Parking Division of the Treasurer's Office for fiscal year beginning July the 1st, 2014, and ending June the 30th, 2015, amounting in the aggregate to the sum of $14,738,900 and containing an emergency clause. That's the extent of our first reading.
Reference to committee.
To the Streets Committee, Board Bill 62, to the Ways and Means Committee, Board Bills 59, 60, and 61. That's the extent of reference to committees.
Second reading.
Following board bills were reported out of the Health and Human Services Committee. Board Bill number 37, sponsored by Alderman Schmidt, an ordinance authorizing and directing the Director of the Department of Human Services to accept a grant award from the Missouri Department of Corrections in the amount of $750,000 and to expend those funds for reentry services for former state offenders and containing an emergency clause. The following board bill was reported out of the Housing Committee, Board Bill number 39, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, and ordinance authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller to enter into and execute a first amendment to the amended and restated redevelopment agreement with respect to the Downtown Convention Center Hotel and containing an emergency clause and a severability clause. The following board bill was reported out of the Ways and Means Committee, Board Bill number 41, committee substitute, sponsored by Alderwoman Flowers, an ordinance approving the petition to establish the Cary Community Improvement District, establishing the Cary Community Improvement District. That's the extent of our second readings.
Alderwoman from the 7th, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to move for suspension of the rules so that we can move Board Bill 39 from the second read to the perfection calendar.
Moved by the Alderwoman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 14th. Any discussion? Alderwoman from the 1st.
President, members of the board, I rise to oppose this motion, and I'm going to make sure that we have a roll call. I was just in committee where I voted against it, but I'm consistent in that I voted against it because it was a mistake 12, 14 years ago. And what we tend to do down at this Board of Aldermen is that we compound mistakes. And one of the things we try to do is speed it up, speed it up, speed it up. It was held 4 times to prevent us from voting it down. So we finally got to have a hearing on it. And that's okay, because that's part of politics. But we ought to be sure to expose our mistakes to the people. We represent the people. The people don't represent us. And it's oftentimes we make mistakes, we just push it under the rug, we just say, oh, we gotta hurry up and get this done, we gotta get this out, so this is gonna be a problem. It was a problem when we passed it 14 years ago. And some of the people now that are on the other side were the people that were with me talking about the problem. The main problem being why I'm opposed to speeding this up again and suspending the rules is because it took money that should have gone into North St. Louis. It took money that should have taken care of the 1st ward, the 2nd ward, the 3rd ward, the 4th ward, the 18th ward, the 19th ward, the 20th ward, the real 20th ward, the 21st ward, the 22nd ward, 27th ward. Okay, so these are things that are in North St. Louis, and people keep saying, what happened to our communities? And people don't talk about the fact what happens to it is we come down here and we think that downtown is the only thing. And that's what I hear. Well, it'll affect downtown. Downtown is but one neighborhood. And we spent $10 million on Washington Street to put cable in the ground in Washington so we could have these upgraded lofts. But we're yet to spend that kind of money in North St. Louis. So I am opposed, I'm telling them.
Please state your point of order, Alderman.
My question is whether or not we're talking about suspension of the rules, or are we already discussing the bill?
We're talking about suspension of the rules. Please keep your comments related to suspension of the rules on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was telling you why I was opposed to suspending the rules, but I will just hold them because they will be right back when she brings them up. This is a horrible bill. We don't need to suspend the rules. We don't need to speed this up. We need to send it back to committee, and we need to hold some people responsible for when they make bad investments, that you make bad investments and you have to pay for it. And that's what we should be doing with this bill. Therefore, I'm opposed to suspending the rules, and I'd ask for a roll call.
Okay. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 14th. Suspend the rules for the purposes of moving forward. Board Bill number 39. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus, Alderwoman Flowers, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderwoman Ingracia, Alderwoman Young, Alderman Conway, Alderman Ortman, Alderman Vollmer, Alderman Villa, Alderman Arnowitz, Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. What's that? Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Cone. 22 aye votes, 2 no votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion, Alderwoman from the 7th. Madam Clerk, please place Board Bill number 39 on the perfection calendar.
So noted.
Dispense with line item 14, perfection consent.
Board Bill number 10, sponsored by Alderwoman Behringer, an ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission to change the zoning of property from A single-family dwelling district and F neighborhood commercial district to the F neighborhood commercial district only in City Block 36, in City Block 6316 for property on Hampton Avenue, and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill number 11, sponsored by Alderwoman Ingracia, an ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission to change the zoning of property from J Industrial District to the F Neighborhood Commercial District in City Blocks 2268 and 2276.4 for properties on McKay Place, Missouri, and Shoto, and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill number 27, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance pertaining to parking within the 1100 block of Taylor Avenue residential parking district and containing definitions, a penalty clause, and an emergency clause. Board Bill number 25, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy and President Reed, an ordinance to provide for the borrowing of funds in anticipation of collection of tax payments for deposit in its general revenue fund for a calendar year ending December the 31st, 2014, and remaining uncollected, and other revenues remaining to be collected and deposited in the general revenue fund for fiscal year ending June the 30th, 2015, and containing an emergency clause. That's the extent of perfection consent.
Alderman from the 17th, you recognize on motion for the perfection consent calendar.
Yes, Mr. President, I move that we approve the perfection and consent calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 17th. Entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 15th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We will dispense with line item 16. Oh, perfection, board bills for perfection.
Board Bill number 39, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller to enter into and execute a first amendment to the amended and restated redevelopment agreement with respect to the Downtown Convention Center Hotel, and containing an emergency clause and a severability clause.
Alderman from the 7th, you recognize on the perfection of Board Bill number 39.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. The board bill, I move for perfection of Board Bill 39.
Moved by the Alderman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 15th. Alderman, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. The board bill before you is basically the same board bill that was considered by this body in January when we were anticipating the sale of the Renaissance Grand Hotel and the, I go back a long way, the Lenox to two different entities. It was financed and constructed as one convention center hotel many years ago, and now the hotel is not carrying the freight, so to speak. The sale is going to two different entities, and so what we've been doing in our legislation here is allowing the split so that the Lenox can be purchased by Merritt Wolf, and it'll become a Courtyard by Marriott. The Renaissance Grand would be purchased by Haverhill, another hotel operator, and it would be rebranded as a Marriott. What we didn't anticipate at the time was that when Marriott takes a brand, they look at the hotel and they anticipate what kind of changes need to occur in order to meet their level of standards. So when Marriott did the review, since that legislation passed in January, their cost for bringing up the Renaissance to a Marriott standard has increased by, or increased the price by $7 million. So the legislation before you today is to help the buyer close that gap. And with that, I renew my motion.
Alderwoman from the first.
President, members of the board. So I suppose this is the correct time to discuss why this is a horrible bill. So this is the third time it's before us. I'm sorry, I correct my previous mistaken verbiage that said this was the second time. So that's right, we were here in January. So the problem that I see is that we continue to anticipate something that just does not happen. 14 years ago, we anticipated what a great thing this would be if we took 108 money that should have been going to Northside to fix up, if we said, oh, we're gonna get that money back one of these days, so you don't really need it North St. Louis. We need it much more downtown because it's much more important that we have a downtown hotel than we care about the communities and the people that live in it. And the people in North St. Louis, do we understand that? We see that all the time with the devaluation of our properties, with the services that we are not rendered in North St. Louis. So if you live your little body across Del Mar, you don't really have to be concerned with that. If you don't have your housing across Del Mar, you don't have to be concerned with that. So when your property values are dropping like rocks, okay, that's all right, because it's much more important that we fix up downtown. We don't take that 108 money that we should, that we make an application for based on the ills of certain neighborhoods and put it back to the neighborhoods. I always find it ironic, because if you apply for a bank loan and you apply for it at a certain property, if you don't use that bank loan at that certain property, you will be in trouble. Now, not to say we haven't been in trouble with the city of St. Louis, because I remember when we took money for the Chase Park Plaza that was supposed to be used for one thing and they used it for something else, and then they said, oh, that's all right. We decided we're gonna go ahead and use this as a hotel, so we're just gonna pay the money back. All of this we continue to do because we're pushing this great downtown. We spend all of this money on downtown, and then people wonder what happened to North St. Louis. What happens to North St. Louis is that we don't get any attention, even the attention except for negative. The things that are positive in our community, or the things that are supposed to help us be a positive influence or help us move forward, we don't get it, or we do things like redistricting and we tear down what's positive. We say, oh, you're so positive, we're gonna tear you down. We're gonna split you up and put you into other things. So we continue to do this. This affects the community. When I say North St. Louis too, I wanna say we're the neighborhoods of North St. Louis. I get so sick and tired of us passing these bills down here, things like this, or watching TV and they say North St. Louis. We're not a blob, we're neighborhoods. We're made up of people who, when you want to get elected, and especially when you're running citywide, not when you're running in your little fiefdoms, you come and ask people to vote for you. And they vote for you based on the thought that I want my life to be better. There's nothing in downtown that the people in the neighborhoods of North St. Louis don't want. Penrose wants it, Mark Twain wants it, Kingsway East wants it, Kingsway West wants it, O'Fallon wants it, Baden wants it. We want all the same things that Riverside or Riverview wants it. We want all the same things that everybody else does, but we get none of the money. And I hear us talk about shoring up what's important, shoring up that's those things that are already successful. We have had successful neighborhoods in our community, and we had successful wards. The 20th, the 21st, the 2nd, the 27th, always been successful. Only when this board decided to tear it up and destroy it. We're successful, middle class, working class people who, before they could move, lived in these neighborhoods because guess what? They weren't allowed to move across other neighborhoods. So they bought their property and they planted their feet, and they have invested in their neighborhoods. So now we see all these problems going on, and we got a chance to have monies like the 108 money that should be going to our neighborhoods, should be shoring up, since you want to shore up downtown because that's successful. But there are successful neighborhoods in North St. Louis. Why wouldn't we be doing that? In fact, we don't. We get irritated when the people who represent those communities have enough nerves to come down here and challenge the status quo and to say, whoa, why are you spending up money? Just think if we could get $10 million in a street, or we could get the money that we spent on a hotel and we put it in our neighborhoods, we wouldn't have those problems. I would need a portion of that kind of money if you had been doing what was proper in the neighborhoods, because the people want to live there. They like St. Louis. They want to stay there, but we are having the rugs pulled out from under us. So when we passed these bills 14 years ago, and we anticipated it was going to be a great thing, and a lot of us did not anticipate that, because some of the very unions are down here now saying, yeah, but we got people working, were the people who were opposed to it and said the same things that I said on the floor 14 years ago, that it would not work, that there were going to be financial problems, that we should not be taking our 108 money and things that should be going to other places and putting that as a collateral when we should be using that for something else. So then we get back to January of this year, it didn't work. So we anticipate, well, we're going to do it this way. We're going to change it around. Where we are now, May, oh, that didn't work either. Now we need $7 million. What are we using that $7 million for? We're doing upgrades, is what I was told in committee, that some of the people who came to speak to us told us that, well, and one of them was a cook. She said that her boss would put things up on the bulletin board because people would complain because the hotel wasn't updated enough. Well, what were the updates? Well, we probably want to change a 40-inch flat screen TV to a 47-inch flat screen TV. Nobody cares. The people who need this money and would have seen that money be used for them do not care if the convention hotel has a 40-inch color screen TV flat screen or a 47-inch. And I would say, I am waiting yet for us to say to anybody but a little small businessman, to all the large businesses who come here and do business, when you make a bad business deal, if indeed it was, then you have to reap the consequences. Whenever you do something, there are burdens and benefits to anything. And people tend to like to have all the benefits and none of the burdens. And we continue to go on with making sure that they don't have to. And we continue to go on passing these bills as though it doesn't affect other parts of the community. I always remember that when we passed this bill, and I tell this story because my office mate at the time was Irv Clay, who we were very close. We got elected together, Alderman from the 26th Ward. And he brought the first black mayor, well, he didn't bring him, but the first black mayor of the city of New Orleans, Mr. Morial, was down here lobbying for this bill. And he shadowed me. He followed me all around, and Irv talked to me. And normally Irv and I could come to an agreement with something, but this was something I could not in my heart support because it was so wrong on so many reasons. I cannot imagine if we had money for downtown that we would say, okay, let's take this money for downtown and give it to the neighborhoods in North St. Louis. We got this for the arch, but we're not going to use that money for the arch. We're going to use it for the communities in North St. Louis. We would not do that. So when they kept saying that to me, I kept saying, but I can't promise to take money that should be someplace else and put it someplace else. I represent a community, and they have a right to have their community shored up. It is a serious mistake for me, whoever the mayor, black or white is, when you focus so much on downtown and the central quarter and then act like that the rest of the neighborhoods do not exist. They do exist, and we have been continuing to make a mistake with this. So this is the third bite out of the apple in which we have decided, well, we gotta, that didn't work, let's try something else. We really don't know what will work, it sounds like to me. We're just throwing good money after bad. It's a phrase that many of us should know. I've learned it from my mom when I was growing up. That was one of the things in our house. We do not throw good money after bad. And we do not stand behind something that says we have to do it because if we don't, this might happen. We have to make plans. We are the stewards of the city of St. Louis and their finances. and we have to make plans. And if if children and our grandchildren had come before us and said, these are the mistakes that we made, we would be giving them speeches about that you have to be responsible for how you spend money. The sponsor said, and I want to quote her, we didn't anticipate, when we were in January, we didn't anticipate the time that when Marriott takes a brand cost for bringing up the Renaissance to the Marriott standard, that the hotel is not carrying the freight, so to speak. No, it's not, because it was never set up to do that. It never was going to do it. When you look at the numbers, it always was an impossible goal to reach for it to work. If you set up a hotel so that they got to have 80, 90, or whatever, 100% occupancy all the time for it to make its numbers, that's not a good deal. As a landlord, I know that I'm going to have a certain amount of vacancies, okay? So if I do my budget based on that I'm going to have 100% occupancy all the time, that is a bad budget, and it does not work. You're most certainly going to have downtime. You're going to have times when you have to upgrade an apartment, and it's the same thing with any piece of real estate. So you have to allow for the margins of when things are not going to be successful or when things are bad. There did not seem to be any margin of error here. Any error was going to cost us greatly, and it has. And we keep coming back here saying what we need to do, and probably in about 6 more months we'll come back again. And I just really am waiting to find out when is the first time that we say, okay, well, this is all we got. We don't have any more money. We can't do that. I've yet to see that with any big business down here. We always seem to find a way to give money to people that are not responsible with our money, or that we didn't have a good deal in the first place. I was asking questions just now in the meeting and of the lawyer, and I asked him about besides there being equity holders, there are always people who are developers who take money off.
We hold it down. Alderman from the 3rd, could you guys hold it down so that she can proceed? Please proceed.
There's always people who get money off the top of the deal. And so I asked in committee who were the equity holders and who were the developer or managing partners who usually get their money straight from the top of the deal. And I wanted to know if they had gotten, and he told me who the people were, and they actually, you can be both equity holders and you can also be the managing partners. And so I wanted to know if they had gotten any money from the deal off the top. And what I was told is that we don't know. And I don't understand that. We're putting all this money up, but at the end of the day, people can not report back to us. I think that's sloppy. If we're putting that kind of money up for people and we're pledging block grant money, 108 money and things like that, we ought to make people come back and to report to us. And for us not to be able to know if they got any money off the top, that's easy for us as politicians, because that lets us off the hook. Because it doesn't look good when we're giving people a lot of money, and then it's found out that they took thousands or millions of dollars off the top of the deal, because then people might be willing to say, maybe we hold this, that we don't make sure that they don't get any money if this thing is not successful. Now, to the lawyer, what the lawyer did say to me is that it was structured so I don't want to be misleading. He said it was structured so that he thought that they didn't get money unless the deal was successful, but we don't know for sure. And to me, that ought to be something that we ought to know for sure. The other thing that happened to us in these 2 or 3 times that this thing was put on informal calendar is that, and I told the person who was the union person that came before us, and we had a conversation afterwards, but they came before us to try to tell us how important their jobs were. And I asked them, and it was 9 or 10 people that came before us, and I asked them, did anybody tell them that they were going to lose their job if we didn't pass this board bill? They had to admit that that was not what was told to them. But what I was very disappointed in is that the people who came before us lived in South St. Louis in Illinois. Not one of them lived in North St. Louis. Now, after speaking to the union organizer, he said that he could show me the zip codes, and this is a good person who I believe, and so I'm going to honor that. But the people who came before us were not anybody that lived in North St. Louis. There were 2 people who said they grew up in North St. Louis, but they didn't live there. So I'm going to get with him because I do want to hear about zip codes, and I want to know about that because that concerns me that we may be leaving off a part of the town that's not being employed, especially with using money that should have been used in North St. Louis. I am continuing to oppose this. I will continue to oppose it. When it comes back again in 5 or 6 more months, I'll be back up here again saying we're taking the 4th or 5th bite. We don't make good financial decisions. We are not a rich city. This community is made up of more than downtown, Sioux Lord, the Central West End. There are other communities that exist. Many of them existed because we had such a racism that they couldn't even live anyplace else, and they've been able to buy their houses and thrive and managed to be very good. Your assistant, Mr. President, knows about it because before he was your assistant, he worked over in North St. Louis, so he knows some of the beautiful properties in the Penrose neighborhood, the O'Fallon neighborhood, the Kingsway East and West neighborhood. The other thing that people often, it just irritates me, and so I say this, there are black and white people that live in North St. Louis. We're not all African Americans. Hispanics live in North St. Louis. And there seems to be a total disregard for our community. And you want me to jump up and down and say, oh, this is great for downtown, and we don't care what happens to your community. So I will be glad to vote for this bill when they take all that money that they put for the arch and you say, you know what, we could really make this work in North St. Louis, so we're going to put it in the neighborhoods of North St. Louis. That's what I'm going to support this bill. I don't think that ever would happen, that we would take downtown money or money that should be going to downtown or the Central West End and put in North St. Louis. And I don't think that we ought to be continuing and furthering a problem that was started 14 years ago and aggravated and continues to get worse and worse and worse. And at what point, I want to know, do we say enough is enough and we won't do this? The point a long time ago was when we first came up, and this bill first came up, we should have not supported it in the first place. And we should be more vigilant in knowing what happens when things fail. When you do a budget, you have to know, well, what if this doesn't work? And it cannot continue to be that when it does not work, that we come back and just get more and more and more. And then we say, we can't clean our streets. My streets are filthy. We can't do all these other things. We can't do these things because we're not doing what we're supposed to. So don't tell me you can't clean Natural Bridge, you can't clean Kings Highway, which my part of Kings Highway is a memorial boulevard for the soldiers. It was built, North Kings Highway between Martin Luther King and West Florissant, it was put there, and the trees were planted as a memorial to the soldiers. We're trying to get that back. But when I look at the filth and the total disregard for just even cleaning up, and then we take monies that could have been done to help clean up and to keep people in the neighborhoods. Because in those 10 years, 14 years since we did this bill, we did another redistricting. And the people who left the most in the city of St. Louis were middle-class African Americans. Got the heck up out of here, because the message we're sending to them is that we don't care about you and that all we care about is downtown. And then we have people like the street commissioners who made remarks about, oh, the people downtown are tweeting, and so we have to reply to that. That sent people in my community out, you know, on the phones calling everybody because they felt like that if they didn't tweet and they didn't email, that their voice was not being heard. Their voice is me. Their voice is Alderman from the 27th. Their voice is Alderman from the 21st. So when they feel like that they're not being heard, it seems like to me the option is to vote with your feet. And so what we have had now this time is a voting with your feet of the middle-class African Americans moving, and we have to stop doing this. We have to start to hold people accountable and make them be responsible and not come with the scare tactics and tell me about what a great deal this is to have a hotel downtown because we got all these taxes and we got all of this. But you did it at the expense of my community. Somehow, I don't think any of you all would think it was great if I took the food out of your children's mouth or your family's mouth and said, but my family is fat and happy. You need to hear that that's not a good sound bite. We are a city that is connected. And so if you're fat and happy, but your right and left hand are dying, you're going to die. And we continue to lose population because we continue to make decisions that are not in the best interest of all the community. And for that reason, I am opposed to this bill and will continue. And I am on record from 14 years ago of saying the very same thing, only now I can say, told you so.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 20th.
Mr. President, members of the board, I found myself shaking my head yes on a number of occasions when my colleague from the First Ward was talking about how important our neighborhoods are and how important these decisions are in terms of priorities. Recently, when HUD was talking about the new plans with the market value analysis and all the rest of it, one of the things that I urged was that we really take a look at what we've done in the last 30 years or so in terms of investment. It seems to me, I recall the Skinker to Bolivar area and some of those areas where there were some major problems, and the people in those areas, as well as the investment, and that's the key part of this, the investment was made in the central corridor of our city. There were major investments made in Benton Park, for instance. I remember when Alderman Abusi worked with others to try to get a lot of investment in that area, and that area has really turned around. But that's not only by the investment. Obviously, the aldermen from the 9th and the people in that area have been working very hard with that. But where we put our investments is very important. So it is troubling, obviously, when we make certain investments, and the question is whether other people are being cut short. And there are many neighborhoods that are critically important to the city of St. Louis. I would ask if the Alderwoman from the 7th would stand for some questions.
Alderwoman from the 7th, will you yield for questioning to the Alderman from the 20th? Yes. Alderman from the 20th, please proceed.
Alderwoman, recently I learned that there were a number of jobs. Most of our hotels don't have union jobs, don't have the protections of a union, but it was my understanding that there may be some union jobs involved with these hotels. Do you know if that's the case and how many jobs are at stake here?
There are 700 union employees at the Renaissance Grand. At the heyday when both the Lenox and the Renaissance were operating as a unit, there were 1,200 employees. So with this bill, with the sale of the hotel, when the Lenox reopens as a courtyard, there'll likely be another 300 or 400 people down there. And while the union representatives brought down people who were in training the other day, and they may not have had all the zip codes of the city, those were only the people who were at the shop that day for training. So if we had a list of all 700, I believe they probably would have covered the entire city.
Thank you. And I'll have another question in a second, but that's okay. So it's my understanding that most of our hotels are not unionized. And I know that we've got folks right now that are walking out of some of the fast food restaurants trying to get a living wage, trying to get to a position that they can do this. And so we have a couple of hotels, a couple of the very few that are unionized that are at risk here. That doesn't forgive any mistakes that may have been made in the past with regard to how we make investments. But so that leads me to my next question. Will the Alderwoman from the 7th continue to yield for another question?
Alderwoman from the 7th, will you yield for more questioning to the Alderman from the 20th?
Yes.
Alderman from the 20th, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. So the Alderwoman from the 1st talked about some 108 monies, and we've heard a lot about 108 monies in the past. It was always my understanding that there's not some sort of pot of 108 monies remaining. So my question is, if I vote no on this matter, or if I vote yes on this matter, is it going to make any difference in terms of whether there are somehow going to be 108 monies available for my neighborhoods in the 20th Ward?
The 108 is a loan from the federal government, and when you get a loan, you have to put up collateral. The collateral for this is City Garden and the land that sits on. So while we took out the loan for the hotel, at the same time we took out a loan $10 million went into the neighborhoods. And if you want, we can go back and find the documentation on which neighborhoods got what pools of money.
But is there
no
money
matter
there?
whether this bill passes or not, the 108 money that's tied up in the hotel will not come back to the city. It goes to pay the loan back to the feds.
Okay.
And those pools, I'm not aware of the fact that there are 108 funds available from the federal government any longer.
That was my understanding. So, I mean, I think there were a lot of good points that have been brought up, and I know that these issues become very difficult given the fact that there's so much past history on these. But I just wanted to get some information about whether we were going to get any 108 monies back and the impact that this might have on people that are trying to find livable wages, that are working hard for a living. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 7th, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I think to think that this hotel is not important to the city is erroneous. There are, as I said, 700 jobs down there. Those jobs are paying earnings tax, they're feeding families, they're putting shoes on kids, they're sending, they're doing heating and cooling, paying house payments or rent. Those are all important things. And when that hotel is full and cranking, it is also a part of the tourism industry. So people who are coming here are going to restaurants, which are also staffed by workers from throughout our city. When the convention center is operating, it's necessary to have a convention center hotel so that we can attract conventions big enough to fill all those rooms and do overflow into the adjacent hotels around town. That's a key part of our industry because the service industry is one of the industries that's growing everywhere. And in order to be attractive as a city, we need that convention center hotel. We have not lost money on it. The payments have been made by the bondholders. The bondholders have been the ones that lost money. The developer lost money. The equity investors lost money. But we as a city have not lost. We have benefited because we have attracted major conventions during this time period. Our downtown is lively when there is a convention center down there. And people are working, and that's what our job is here at the board, is to keep people working so that the taxes flow, people have income to support their families, and that's what this whole bill is about. So with that, I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 15th, that we perfect Board Bill number 39. It's been a request for roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Kennedy. Alderman Cone. 20 aye votes, 2 no votes, 1 present.
By your vote, you sustain the motion. Alderman from the 7th and perfected Board Bill number 39.
That's the extent of board bills for perfection.
Third reading consent.
Board bills 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9.
Alderman from the 17th, you recognize on the motion for the third reading consent calendar.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the third reading consent calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 17th, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Conway is aye. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Kennedy. Alderman Cone. 23 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion. The Alderman from the 17th and third read and finally passed the aforementioned bills.
That's the extent of third reading consent.
We'll dispense with line item 18, report of enrollment.
Board bills 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9.
All other business being suspended, the President shall in open session affix his signature hereto to the end that these may become law. Alderman from the 3rd.
Mr. President and members of the board, I'd like to recognize as my special guest this morning, Mr. Darnell Durley.
I move for adoption of our courtesy resolution calendar and entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 12th. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion carries. We dispense with line items 21 and 22, miscellaneous unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
Monday, May the 19th, Ways and Means Committee meeting at 9 a.m. in the Kennedy Room. The schedule is attached. Tuesday, Ways and Means Committee meeting, 9 a.m. in the Kennedy Room. Schedule is attached. Also on Tuesday, Housing meeting at 9 a.m. in the Leisure Room. Wednesday, Ways and Means Committee meeting, 9 a.m. in the Kennedy Room. Schedule is attached. Thursday, full board meeting, 10 a.m. in the chambers. Friday, no meetings. No meetings on Friday. That's the extent of my announcements.
Alderman from the 23rd.
Yes, I'd like to ask, in the rotunda today is GSA Academy. It's a charter school operating out of the Epiphany building and over on Filer Avenue. They won some awards in science, and they're doing demonstrations of some of their things right now in the lobby. So I would hope that everybody would take a chance, stop down, visit with the kids. They're a part of multiple communities. It's a school that a lot of kids come to.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 1st.
Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to announce once again that tomorrow, Saturday, May 17th, from 10 a.m. until noon, there will be a First Ward meeting at the United House of Prayer for All People. It's 3300 North Kings Highway. And one of the people that will be there will be the 5th District Police Captain, John Hayden. We also have our new NSO, Joe Jones. Our license collector will probably be there or at the next meeting. I can't remember which. And I will have a full report about what's going on at the board. And you will be able to get information about signing up for 50/50 sidewalk, trees, healthy home repair, and some report about the development that's going on in the First Ward. And I do want to thank Mr. Otis Williams, because he has been working with me. So we are getting some new things, and I appreciate that.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to announce that tomorrow at the O'Fallon Rec Center, there will be a health fair that's sponsored by the Urban League Guild from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. We'll have all kinds of screenings available. We'll also be giving some information about lupus. That is our focus, lupus tomorrow. And so representatives will be there from the Lupus Foundation as well. I'd also like to give recognition to a young attorney here in town, Shara Truitt. She is having open house for her law office tomorrow at 8907 Lackland. And even though I couldn't keep her in the city, she's a diehard as far as the city is concerned. And I'm very excited for her. And that's from 2 to 4 p.m. tomorrow. We will also recognize on Monday Carol North and Nick Kaya from the Metro Theater. They have both invested 40 years of service towards the artistic endeavors for the city of St. Louis with the Metro Theater, and most specifically dealing with young people and young theater. So I'm very excited for them. That will take place at the Sheldon Theater from 5:30 to 7:30. Tickets range from $25 to $200, but even if you just have a moment to come by and say hi to them if you've been involved in the past. And also based on their work, the City of St. Louis and the Metro Theater will be recognized at the Kennedy Center on Monday as well, and we'll be honored for the Harold Oakes Award. And that award represents theater for young people. So again, Metro Theater is a very important part of St. Louis and what happens there, and I want to congratulate them. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further announcements? Alderman from 26.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Just a friendly reminder, Annie Malone will be having their annual parade Sunday. I don't know the time, but they will be having their parade. We just want everyone to come out, have fun, be respectful and safe. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We also have our license collector here with us today. Thank you for coming out and joining us today, Madam License Collector. We appreciate having you. Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderman from the 17th, you recognize on the motion to excuse.
Yes, Mr. President, and I move that we excuse the alderpersons from the 4th, 6th, 10th, 11th, and 25th wards.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 17th, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman from the 17th, you recognize on the motion to adjourn.
Yes, Mr. President, I move that we are adjourned till next Thursday, everybody. Mark your calendars.
Moved by the Alderman from the 17th, seconded by the Alderman from the 22nd. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Stand adjourned.